How should you structure your MSP service catalog in the age of cloud? We'll tackle that question on today's MSP Zone.
You're entering the MSP Zone, a podcast for the managed services community, covering news, analysis, and interviews from around the globe. Elevate your MSP game by staying in the MSP Zone. And now, your host, Charles Weaver.
Welcome to the MSP Zone. Welcome back if you're a frequent listener, where we talk about topics related to the managed services, cloud computing profession. We leave nothing off the table. Everything is fair game. And we bring you honest, frank discussions that we hope you can take back to your managed services practice and put it to good use. Today is no exception. We have a fantastic discussion in line for you guys. And we're going to be tackling something that does not get a lot of attention. And that is service catalogs for MSPs. Not a lot of MSPs do this. A few think they're doing it. Probably not a lot do it in the way that it ought to be done. But we're going to be talking about managed services catalogs and specifically how those service catalogs can and ought to be modified for entirely or at least hybrid cloud managed services offerings. Now, that's a lot. It sounds like a lot, but we're going to break it down. We're going to make it very easy for you guys. And as an added bonus, we have our friend Rob Scott joining us from the great state of Texas. Rob, welcome back to the MSP Zone.
Good to be with you, Charlie.
All right. So let's just paint the picture, right? Circa 2008, 2009, we had the beginning of, and it was a rapid death of the on-premise, what I'll call the bread and butter of most MSPs at that time, and for the last decade before, the small business exchange server that Microsoft had developed and were selling quite profitably all throughout the world. There was a piece of software that sat on a server, and most MSPs would make a really good, profitable business around selling it, configuring the hardware and the software, that is, deploying it to a customer, and then managing it. Managing the firewall, managing the security, managing the software itself, managing the backups, all those things related and circled and orbited the server and the small business exchange server software. Then the age of cloud hit us. And you started with things like BPOS, which was the precursor to Microsoft 365, Google Apps. Wasn't called Google Apps at the time, but you had all these things start to impact the MSP channel. In your opinion, Rob, I mean, I'd like to start off first with the question of, do you think that a lot of MSPs know or have a good, up-to-date, functioning service catalog today?
Well, look, I mean, I think of a service catalog as a menu of services. And so everybody has some menu that they're showing to customers, either in terms of proposals or marketing on websites. So yes, they have it. The issue of the catalog is one where when you start to try to automate and put controls on customer contracting that will enable scale and put guardrails around what kind of language can be included and put workflows in place to where they're getting approved by the right people, including potentially legal. That's when you start to think about a formal catalog that could be loaded, for example, into a quoting tool that's connected to an RMM solution. So, we're starting to put the SKUs that will be managed in the workflow and management system in at the time of proposal. And it's just a way to leverage, in many instances, what many MSPs have already licensed but not utilized in terms of quoting and proposal tools that are modules within platforms that they probably are already using.
I mean, I recall, this is at least 10 years ago or more. And I remember somebody saying basically, we'll do whatever our customers need. And that used to be a really frequently uttered statement by MSPs, right? Well, it doesn't matter what do you do as an MSP? Whatever the customer needs, whatever they want. And that told me you don't have a menu. That's the functional equivalent of going to a restaurant and saying, "Where's the menu?" and the chef says, "No, you tell me what you want and I'll make it for you." That's not a scalable business. Do you think that type of practicing MSP is still around today?
It is, but it's a struggling and very much a dying model that is going to be dependent on, the specific owner or techs that are there at the time. It's going to be one that won't be amenable to rapid growth. It's going to be one that is performs on the lowest end of the profitability range. And so if I'm, advising a business about how to structure its offerings, it's going to be the opposite of what you've just described. Bespoke, custom IT solutions don't make repeatable managed services practices.
It sounds good, but it doesn't make the profit margin that MSPs want and expect.
Correct. Think about it like this, Charlie. If a client came to me and said, "Rob, I'm in the managed services business. I need contracts to cover, 6 or 8 different types of services that I offer to clients. And if I had to start over each time and develop a custom solution as opposed to starting with something that's going to be 80% of the way each time, there's no way I could deliver the services effectively." And it's the same way. How do I teach my staff? If a client hires us to do customer contracts, I have staff that have done hundreds of customer contract projects.
So we're going to get into the contract issue in just a moment. Now that we've defined kind of what a service catalog is, and again, I think that there are varying degrees of maturity of how an MSP could use a service catalog, meaning varying degrees of how precise and specific that service catalog really is and how accountable it is from the point of contracting, sales, contracting, and then through fulfillment and enforcement of that fulfillment of the service. My question to you, Rob, is in that era of 2008 to 2009, when we had the shift and cloud started to really become prominent, today there are certainly born in the cloud MSPs, right? That all they do is cloud-based infrastructure. Everything that they sell is cloud-based, SaaS-based, et cetera. And then you've got, I'm sure you probably have some 100% on-premise based, but they're probably not that common. And more likely, you're going to see the majority of MSPs who are hybrid. They're doing a little bit of on-premise and they've got a little bit of cloud. In your opinion, how does the service catalog change? And knowing we're going to talk about the contract in a moment, how does the service catalog change, if at all, with the cloud service offerings being contemplated?
Well, I think that you have to have, and we used to have gold, silver, and platinum, and now I think we've got on-prem, cloud, and hybrid. And if we think about managed services in those ways, we can develop service descriptions that cover, each category. With, as you say, the vast majority are in the hybrid. And if you think about it, probably 20% of MSP's workload in total today is in the cloud. That means there's 80% of runway left to complete this migration now 13 years later than the time frame you're talking about for email. Mm-hmm. To a cloud delivery model for the vast majority of IT. But the way that it needs to change is that the services being provided are fundamentally different.
So so let's dive into that and explore. Let's take servers, right? If an MSP today can deliver any type of server on premise, co-located in a local data center, and then they can sell it on Azure or AWS or pick your cloud environment. Your contention is that service catalog should adequately describe the real differences, not just in price, but the real differences in what would go into managing the server in the cloud versus the on-premise. And they should really be different variations of the same product.
That's right, because most of what we would call traditional on-prem core managed services in the example that you provide will be performed by Microsoft.
So the cloud provider picks up a handful of the base. I'm going to call it all the grunt work, but a lot of it is the kind of ping, power, pipe, the fundamentals, we would call it, of managing a server device, a server object. That goes away, and therefore, but you don't price it cheaper necessarily because there's different threats that take place, correct?
Well, the pricing is not necessarily cheaper. And there is some pricing risk for MSPs when it comes to, for example, Azure, which is a utility-based or consumption-based spend model. And so, for example, when we had an on-prem server, we knew what the cost was going to be. With Azure, we don't know what the cost is going to be. And one of the services that the MSP is going to have to provide is optimization of spend. They have, reports within the tool that MSPs are going to have to monitor, and it'll identify areas where you can consolidate and optimize spend, and it'll be my guess the MSP's responsibility to report on that and implement the things that the customer says they want to reduce the spend. So again, it's more of almost like a vendor management responsibility, more so than you, like you said, you're not going to be responsible for that uptime and availability, but you're going to have other responsibilities related to those servers, and it's just going to be different services than what you were providing before.
So the cloud server on Azure still needs to be backed up. It still needs to be protected outside of and beyond the things that Microsoft is already doing. There's still things that the MSP needs to contemplate, and those have to be articulated in that service catalog. That's really what we're saying.
Yes, and I think there's two categories of service types. One is administering and managing the cloud infrastructure, using the tools provided by the cloud providers such as Azure. So I'm talking about like management of Defender. If the customer is going to be using any of the Defender security, it's going to be a managed security service to administer the Defender for clients that are in Azure that are using Defender.
Right.
And there's the second category of third-party security solutions that are in addition to what will be resident in that cloud provider solution, such as if you've got reporting, cloud reporting, or there are tools now that provide a consolidated pane of glass for all cloud environments, and MSPs are and will continue to be providing reporting services regarding access to and security logs related to cloud infrastructure. So the services are changing. The market, my clients are telling me prices don't need to go down because while there is an expectation that the hardware piece is going away, the customer recognizes that someone is providing the hardware and there's a cost there, and that there are increased risks. And so more money needs to be invested in security.
Yeah, the hardware didn't go away. It just got transferred from a capital expense for the customer to an operational expense as a service deliverable.
Right. So theoretically, your pricing could be as much as your client's former capital cost plus the traditional managed services.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can make it lower than that and or keep it in that line and demonstrate why the increased efficiency, availability, security, et cetera, is worth it, then pricing should not be an option. I would tell you, my sense of the market and the feedback I'm getting from my clients is that this is not a commoditized aspect of the market. You talked about email. That's now we're 13 years later from that revolution that you described. In some ways, hosting of email has become a very price sensitive type of service. Managing people's virtual environments in the cloud and offering virtual desktop services and other cloud-based managed services, in my impression, is not a commoditized or heavily price-sensitive area of the business right now. It's going to be suitable for certain businesses that want to do business a certain way, and for many of them, they're going to see the value in it, even if it costs more than what they were paying before.
So, Rob, what I'm hearing is that that cloud has not damaged the professional polish that has so long accompanied the managed services profession, even with commoditized things such as Office 365, which you can find that pricing guideline freely available on the web, right? Same with Google, but you're saying it's not at all hampered or harmed the pricing upside that MSPs can add on in terms of the additional value and work that they have to do. Did I get that right?
100%, because really what's changed, in my opinion, is MSPs used to have to be good at hosting mailboxes. Now they have to be good at managing diverse networks and various security threats and people accessing the network from non-traditional remote endpoints. And being a trusted advisor regarding IT has never been more valuable than it could be right now. And so those people that are MSPs that care about their customers and are there to offer solutions for their customers are in very high demand. The vast majority of my clients that are in managed services are reporting that they had up years, and in some instances the best years ever during the pandemic, and that momentum is strong, and the only impediment to growth is human resources.
Right. Well, I mean, I agree, and we should probably do a whole episode just on the human element of managed services in the future of the profession. But I think that the service catalog issue is a undeniably indispensable element to scalability. And that's my next question, which is I want to bring in the legal element of this, which is the service catalog is important for being able to price effectively, being able to hold the service department accountable for the things that they ought to be delivering, and only those things they ought to be delivering. But it has to have a close correlation to the service agreement, the actual contract that the sales and marketing teams are sending out to customers. Explain how those two correlate, service catalog to service agreement.
So at the highest level of maturity, the service catalog descriptions become the operative descriptions for the customer contracts, driven directly from the orders or the quotes that are signed. And stated another way, if your service catalog is mature enough to where it contains, appropriate descriptions of the services that you're offering, we can take those directly from a quote, add some language to a quote that then incorporates the rest of the agreements by reference, and we can store those agreements on the web, and we can have the quote or the proposal signed via a DocuSign or another electronic means, and by virtue of that, create a way that we've collapsed the sales process and the contracting process into one step, and at the same time loaded the SKUs that were going to be necessary to manage within the system go directly into the system as that project, as that contract is set up to be managed. And so that's where that maturity level can make a big difference, because then what my contracts will say on the web is, as defined in your order. When it talks about the services to be offered, it's going to be the services contained in the order. And that way, the customer contract itself doesn't need to be changed with the specifics of each order. The customer contracts will call to the order to identify the services that are included and the pricing. And then the terms that are on the web are incorporated by reference into the document that the customer signs at the time that the business terms are agreed to. And for the vast majority of cases, that will be the end of the contracting process. If the customer wants to negotiate on specific items, then that would be taken as a separate path that would require owner review, potentially legal review, et cetera.
Yeah, I want to ask you a sales question, and I'm making an assumption here, which is that you might actually get a glimpse into the sales process of some of these MSPs who are your clients because of the contractual work you're doing. And the question is this: does the MSP we talked about earlier in the show, the one that says I'll do anything for my customer, whatever they want, that's what I'll do as a managed service. Does that customer, they must have a far more difficult sales and contracting process than the MSP who has a highly articulated service catalog, which then gets incorporated easily, as you just said, into the service agreements. It's got to have a remarkable difference on their ability to contract and sign revenue. Am I wrong on that, or
100%? It's 100%. It's like, how long does it take to order food at McDonald's versus a Greek diner? I mean, you got this is our menu. It's simple, right? It's and the other thing that is challenging with this, with taking these one-off projects, you got a client, they're a mid-sized client, they've got their own IT department, they want multi-factor authentication, or they want security awareness training, or they want managed firewall, but they're not going to buy a stack. They're just going to buy a select item. Mm-hmm. My opinion on that is, if you have to take that work, take it. It's like I would have told people, 15 years ago, if you have to sell hardware, sell it, but I'm trying to get you out of that business. And it turned out to be good advice, right? In the same way, I'm telling clients now, for these one-offs, if it's profitable and you think it's okay, take it, but don't incentivize your salespeople to chase that. Don't pay commissions on that type of work.
Well, reselling software is no functional difference between the VAR selling hardware and expecting to become a great top-notch MSP, because the sales engine is going to keep moving towards those things that they can move. And that's easier to move hardware and software than it is to move a managed services customer. But what you're saying is almost democratizing the managed services offering into a way that anyone could buy it. Anyone should be able to buy it.
The point is this: once you decide that you're going to go in the cloud, right? You need a quarterback to manage your various cloud providers, and to make sure they're safe. And so that, to me, is the role of the MSP. The role of the MSP is to help people, at this point, realize the benefits of cloud. And I think shortly it's going to be to help people realize the benefits of artificial intelligence. But because of that, that's not a commodity skill. That's a very important business and technical skill to have.
No, very much so. Yeah, I agree. So Rob, I want to ask you one final question. In your work with MSPs, the contractual side of this, when you're asking them for a service catalog, how many of those MSPs on average, let's say, have a really top-notch, they're ready to go, it's perfectly suitable for the contractual work that you need to do, versus how many of them need a little bit of polishing? You tell them, hey, go back, we need more details here. Like, can you give us a sense of where that falls out?
Yeah, I think the vast majority are in a position that you've described, where they've got some, service catalogs, but for example, it may just say managed services monthly device-based, $10 a device.
Very generic, in other words.
very, very generic, not enough to drive the contracting platform in the manner that I described. In other words, the service descriptions that would be contained in the proposal that is derived from the service catalog would be inadequate to serve as the complete service descriptions. And for that reason, we provide samples. When our clients hire us and we deliver the draft of the documents, if they don't have, solid descriptions that they're happy with that we can review, we just include, a laundry list of descriptions, and they can pick and choose and edit and add and et cetera. But so I would say it's fairly uncommon, but interestingly, the MSPs that are more successful, more mature, been around longer, more profitable, they're the ones that have it because they recognize the things that you and I have been discussing on the call: scalability, uniformity, managing risk, making it easy to understand at any time exactly what we owe these people and what they agreed to and what they're paying for and not. All of those issues, as you get to be larger than a few man shop, become critically important to business owners and affect service delivery and profitability.
Well, I can't this popped in my head just now as you were talking, Rob. I can't help but think that the legacy problems that MSPs have had with sales, just the sales side of taking certainly the VAR salesperson and converting them into a managed services salesperson, which I think it's a lost cause. I mean, if it happens successfully, it happens rarely. It's not the norm. But I think if you want to create a first-class, highly efficient and goal-driven managed services sales team, I don't see how they do that without what you just described, that service catalog and a great, efficiently documented service agreement system. Like I just don't see how they get it there.
Yeah, it's got to be a tight process, and it includes a lot of sales, activity tracking and numbers like that. The best MSPs have very specific, quotas for number of calls and contacts, number of appointments, and expected conversion rates for salespeople, and it requires that type of rigor. I mean, you just can't, take anyone off the street and turn them into a productive salesperson in managed services or really in anything else.
Good point.
And so it remains a challenge for many MSPs, though. It's really changing the way they operate. For most MSPs, I would say a principal or partner or family member is engaged in the selling. And, that's where we could start. The people that are in control of how they're approaching it, how they're selling things, how they're, packaging their story. That's the low-hanging fruit, because there's still a lot of owners out there that are, telling a different story, telling a similar story to, what was being told before. And what we're learning is that cloud-based offerings and managed services are in high demand. They're very scalable and they're very profitable. They come with a degree of risk. And there are things that need to be addressed there, because you're bringing together lots of third parties, all of which now have access to confidential and regulated data, and it's very risky from a privacy and security perspective. But it's the future, and we still have a long runway. I mean, we've got all the evidence that this is the direction, and we still got 80% of the workload to move. So this is a huge opportunity for managed service providers in the next 3 to 5 years to really help their clients on that remaining 80% of the workload to move it there, because I don't think anybody can really credibly argue that we're going to be at a much higher percent than 20 in 3 years.
Well, I think overall pretty positive outcomes that I would take if I were listening to this and say, all right, get your service catalog updated, number one. Number two, get your service catalog incorporated tightly into your service agreements. do the things that Rob is suggesting, including putting your master service agreements online, right, for easy reference, easy click by reference incorporation, and start really driving your sales team according to that service catalog. And not only will you have a much tighter process, but, Rob, I think you're spot on. This is not by any stretch a commoditized part of managed services, and it won't be for quite some time. There's still a lot of really profitable work to be done, and I would take a lot of comfort from those words. So I very much appreciate you guys, everything you guys do at Scott & Scott, but I think this is really good advice for any MSP. All right, that's it. Rob, thanks again for joining us on MSP Zone.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it.
And to the rest of you, be safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a like. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast so you will get notified when future episodes are released. We will see you next time in the MSP Zone.